Thanks, gentlemen. Thank the director as well for his time here. I want to say how much I applaud your goal of balancing a budget. As already been noted, the last administration did not have that as a goal. It didn't balance in perpetuity. I very much admire that. I admire your willingness to make cuts, both in taxes and in spending. We've had much conversation on the Appalachian Regional Commission because you've actually proposed cuts, and it's something a lot of administrations have not proposed. I admire you. We've worked together over any number of different years in different capacities. I think you're bright, capable, and caring.
Have to write that down?
Yeah, I will. I will. And I generally sympathize with the fact that you're doing an executive branch budget, which I did for 8 years of my life, and that's a difficult process. But, and I will go to the but, I want to go back to what we talked about yesterday. You have said that the foundation of your budget is 3% growth. And I've looked every which way at how you might get there, and you can't get there. And as a consequence, I think it is just disastrously consequential to build a budget on 3% budget. The Bible says you can't build a house on a sandy foundation. What it does is it perpetuates a myth that we can go out there and balance the budget without touching entitlements. It's not only a myth, it's frankly a lie. And if it gets started at the executive branch level, it moves from there. And so I think that this notion of 3%, I heard literally the Speaker of the House talking today about the notion of 3% growth and how we can balance the budget. I just, again, as earnestly as I have looked at this, I don't know how you get there. And what this does is it creates real debates from happening. I mean, legitimately, myself and Democratic colleagues can see things quite differently. But for us to have a real debate, we have to base it on real numbers. I would also say it's important because I'm a deficit hawk, as you well know. And if you're wrong on these numbers, it means all of a sudden we've created a $2+ trillion hole for our kids and grandkids here going forward. So I want to walk through a couple of different numbers with you. One, this budget presumes a Goldilocks economy. And I think that that's a very difficult thing on which to base a budget. If you look at the average economic expansion in the history of our country, it's 58 months. The current expansion that we're in is actually the third longest economic expansion in American history. We're at 94 months. But what you presume in this budget is not only will we not have a recession, though we're in the third longest economic expansion in history, but it's going to keep going for another 214 months. It's not only unprecedented, I would think that to be unreasonable. It assumes that the stars perfectly align with regard to economic drivers. Can you guess the last time we had an unemployment rate of 4.8%, growth at 3%, and inflation held at 2%? It's never happened. The last time that growth was at 3%, we held for a sustained period of time the 10-year bond yield below 5%. You all presume 3.8%. Can you guess the last time that's ever happened?
Again, I'm trusting you on the assumptions.
Yeah, it's never happened. So we're going way out there on the curve in terms of assumption. And then in terms of the ingredients of growth, I actually broke out some numbers here. You know, capital formation would have to go to the record level that we've seen in terms of capital growth from 1965 to 1974, though capital formation actually goes down as people retire. They withdraw from savings accounts. Labor force growth would have to go to see what we saw in the 1970s and 80s when women were joining the workforce in mass. And even if you include the labor participation rates, took them back up to the numbers that we saw in the 1990s, we would see a 0.2%, a decimal increase, not a percentage increase. It would require either radically opening immigration or a radical change to demographics, as we are having 10,000 baby boomers retire each day. If you look at productivity growth, it would require numbers, again, that we haven't seen since the golden days of 1958 to 1967 in the final wave of electrification, consumer appliance, and the completion of the highway system to achieve what we're seeing, even if we went to 1990 numbers, we would only see 1/4 of what is necessary to achieve 3% growth, though the RAND Corp says that a reduction of 15% is to be presumed with aging. I would just lastly submit this for the record, which is to say, if you look at the correlation between OMB and CBO
Entered
budgets,
for the record without objection. I'm sorry, the gentleman's time's expired.
all right.